Nobody messes with the Chapitos, and those who dares pays dearly. These were the Chapitos statements before destroying one of the SEDENA bases, killing multiple members of this group. The end of the video shows how they executed their plan. It all began with an increase in military pressure in the areas controlled by the Chapitos, especially in the state of Sinaloa, where authorities had intensified operations to capture cartel leaders. This context of hostility was perceived by the Chapitos as a direct threat to their territorial control and hegemony within Mexican drug trafficking. The group's leaders decided to plan an attack that would weaken the SEDENA and demonstrate their willingness to directly confront the military apparatus of the Mexican state. The target of the attack was located in a strategic area near Culiac, Sinaloa. This military base was known to be a crucial logistical center for SEDENA's operations in the northwest of the country. From there, anti-drug trafficking operations were coordinated and troops were deployed to key points in the region. For the Chapitos, destroying this facility meant not only a symbolic blow, but also a real weakening of the army's operational capabilities in the area. The attack was carefully planned over weeks. According to Posters reports, the Chapitos drew on their network of informants within the security forces and government institutions to obtain detailed information about the number of personnel present at the base, patrol patterns, and security measures. Using this information, they designed a meticulous plan that involved both a direct offensive as well as diversionary and blocking tactics to maximize impact and minimize the possibility of a rapid response by the armed forces. The attack began in the early hours of a Friday morning, taking advantage of the base's vulnerability during these early hours. A convoy of heavily armored and heavily armed vehicles, made up of hitmen trained in military tactics, approached the base through previously guarded routes to avoid detection. The vehicles were equipped with high-caliber weapons, including machine guns, grenade launchers, and assault rifles. Showing the level of preparation and access to resources the Chapitos had been able to consolidate prior to the main assault. The Chapitos executed a series of simultaneous attacks in other nearby locations, including military checkpoints and police stations, to divert the attention of the SEDENA and force security forces to disperse their resources. These diversionary maneuvers proved effective, as much of the available reinforcements were mobilized to these areas, leaving the main base with a reduced number of troops compared to its total capacity when the convoy arrived. When the convoy arrived in the vicinity of the base, the attack began with overwhelming intensity. The gunmen deployed urban combat tactics, advancing in small groups, and using the cover of the terrain to neutralize surveillance points and the base's defensive perimeters. The first to be attacked were the guards stationed at the main entrances, who, despite valiantly resisting, were overcome by the numerical superiority and firepower of the attackers. Chaos reigned in a matter of minutes inside the base, and the Chapitos were able to quickly infiltrate the facilities, destroying communication equipment and surveillance systems to cut off any attempt at coordination between the military. This left the soldiers inside the base at a disadvantage, as they were unable to organize an effective defense or call for immediate reinforcements. Meanwhile, the assassins advanced with precision, attacking key points of the military infrastructure, including weapons depots and vehicles. One of the most critical moments of the attack was the explosion of an ammunition warehouse inside the Los Chapitos base. Using previously obtained information, they had identified this warehouse as a priority target. Explosives were placed at strategic points and detonated simultaneously, causing a massive explosion that not only destroyed the base's arsenal, but also caused significant damage to the surrounding area, creating panic among the military personnel as the attack continued. Soldiers inside the base attempted to organize a desperate resistance. However, the tactical superiority and weaponry of the attackers, combined with the confusion generated by the loss of communication and the explosion of the ammunition depot, led to a significant counterattack. The military faced considerable casualties, and many were forced to retreat to safer areas within the installation as the attackers took control of large sections of the base. The standoff lasted several hours, and despite their efforts to retake control, the Chapitos were able to cause devastating damage. The criminal group began to withdraw from the base at dawn, taking with them weapons and military equipment they had looted during the attack. Before leaving, the Chapitos left a clear message. They painted graffiti on the walls of the base with phrases such as "The cartel rules" and "The Chapiza controls Sinaloa," sending a defiant message to both the armed forces and their rivals. The toll of the attack was devastating. Dozens of soldiers were killed, the base was partially destroyed, and a large amount of military equipment was stolen or rendered useless. This event marked an unprecedented blow to the SEDENA, not only in operational terms, but also in terms of morale. For the armed forces, the destruction of one of their bases by a criminal group was a reminder of the magnitude of the challenge posed by the Chapitos and drug trafficking in general. The impact of the attack was felt far beyond Sinaloa. At the national level, the Mexican government faced criticism for its inability to foresee and prevent an attack of this magnitude. Images of the destroyed base and reports of similar casualties circulated widely in the media, generating outrage and concern among the population. The Chapitos used the attack as a propaganda tool, reinforcing their image as an unstoppable force within Mexican drug trafficking. In the weeks that followed, the SEDENA launched a series of operations to try to capture those responsible for the attack. However, these efforts were met with fierce resistance from the Chapitos, who used their knowledge of the terrain and their network of collaborators to evade the armed forces and continue to operate with relative impunity. For months, SEDENA's intelligence analysts worked tirelessly to identify the movements and patterns of behavior of the Chapitos. Using surveillance drones, wiretaps, and informant networks, they were able to map drug trafficking routes, safe houses, and meeting points where cartel leaders coordinated their operations. This hard work, which required patience and precision, eventually began to show results, leading to the identification of some of the cartel's most important members. One of the key moments in this operation was the interception of a phone call between two high-ranking Chapito leaders. In the conversation, they discussed the logistics of an important meeting that was to take place at a remote farm in the state of Sinaloa. The importance of this information prompted the deployment of a specialized team to monitor the area for days. Drones and intelligence units collected data on vehicle movements and security measures implemented by the cartel. This effort culminated in the identification of a luxury convoy transporting several Chapito leaders to the location. The operation to capture these leaders was designed with surgical precision. SEDENA mobilized a group of special forces known for their ability to conduct swift and lethal raids. These units, equipped with state-of-the-art technology, were under strict orders to minimize civilian casualties and prevent the targets from escaping at all costs. The raid began early in the morning, when the criminals were most vulnerable. The special forces moved swiftly and stealthily, using armored vehicles and supported by helicopter gunships. They managed to take the hired assassins guarding the farm by surprise. Despite initial resistance, the armed forces neutralized the guards and penetrated the property. Inside, they found several of the cartel's leaders who tried to hide or escape through underground tunnels. However, thanks to prior intelligence, the SEDENA already knew of these tunnels and had deployed units to block them. The result of the operation was a resounding success. Several of the Chapitos leaders were captured, including two key brothers who managed logistical and financial operations for the cartel. In addition, the armed forces seized an impressive arsenal that included assault rifles, grenade launchers, tactical equipment, and a considerable amount of drugs ready to be transported. This coup represented a symbolic and operational victory for the SEDENA, but it also unleashed a wave of retaliatory violence by the cartel in the days following the capture. The days following the capture were marked by intense activity in Chapito-controlled areas, including blockaded roads, burning vehicles, and attacks on police stations in a desperate attempt to free their leaders. However, the SEDENA had anticipated this reaction and deployed reinforcements at strategic points to contain the violence, preventing reprisals from getting out of control. Although tensions in the region remained high for weeks, the SEDENA managed to contain the retaliation and continue their operations. Meanwhile, the captured prisoners were transferred to maximum security facilities, where an exhaustive process of interrogation took place. The information obtained from these interrogations proved invaluable to the ongoing investigations. The detainees revealed details about the cartel's internal structure, international trafficking routes, and the names of key collaborators both inside and outside of Mexico. This information allowed SEDENA to plan a series of additional operations that culminated in the capture of more cartel members in the following months. One of these operations was particularly significant. After analyzing the information provided by the detainees, SEDENA identified an industrial complex in the state of Sonora that functioned as a production and distribution hub for methamphetamines. This complex was hidden in a remote area and protected by a small army. The operation to dismantle it required the use of specialized equipment to deactivate explosives and neutralize booby traps set by the cartel. The assault on the compound resulted in the seizure of tons of drugs, as well as the capture of other key members of the cartel, members in charge of overseeing narcotics production. This was a devastating blow to the Chapitos, as it not only represented a significant financial loss, but also affected their ability to operate internationally. The capture of this leader provided new information that helped authorities continue tracking other members of the organization. The SEDENA continued with this strategy of precise strikes using the intelligence obtained to attack key points of the cartel and capture more of its members. Each operation weakened the Chapitos a little more, who were forced to reorganize and redistribute their resources to maintain their territorial control. But the damage was done, and the organization began to show signs of internal fracture, with some of its leaders questioning the decisions of the remaining. The beginning of hell, the regime imposed by the SEDENA, left no room for human dignity. The prisoners were constantly watched by guards, who not only carried out orders, but also seemed to relish the opportunity to exercise power over these men who, until recently, had terrorized entire regions of the country. Humiliations were constant, and they were often forced to perform degrading tasks, such as cleaning communal toilets with bare hands or crawling on the floor in the presence of others. These actions sought to destroy any vestige of pride or resistance. Food, or what was offered to them, was another tool of torture. Prisoners received minimal rations, insufficient to sustain them. Often, the food was in poor condition, a deliberate method to weaken them physically. Malnutrition not only affected their physical health, but also contributed to the deterioration of their mental stamina, making them more vulnerable to interrogation. Some of the prisoners, desperate for more than hard bread and stale water, offered to cooperate in exchange for a decent meal. But even then, the reward never came. Physical punishment was constant whenever a prisoner showed the slightest sign of resistance or defiance. The guards acted with unrelenting violence. The blows were methodical, applied in such a way as to cause maximum pain without causing visible wounds that could be documented. The batons, electric shocks, and fists were common tools in this system of torture. Sometimes, prisoners were hung by their wrists for hours until their bodies gave out under the weight and pain. Other times, they were submerged in freezing water or exposed to extreme temperatures, all for the purpose of weakening them and forcing them to talk. The psychological aspect of this campaign of torture was equally devastating. Prisoners were constantly deprived of sleep, awakened every hour by bright lights or deafening noises. Guards whispered threats in the dark that their families were in danger, or that they would never see the light of day again. In some cases, they would place the prisoners in pitch-black rooms for days at a time, leaving them without any notion of time. This sensory isolation drove many of them to the brink of insanity. The interrogations, the main purpose of this whole system of torture, were as brutal as the punishments. Prisoners were dragged to special rooms where a team of trained interrogators used methods that combined physical violence with psychological manipulation. They were often made to listen to pre-recorded screams that simulated the suffering of their loved ones, or were shown fake photographs of their families being tortured. These tactics sought to exploit their deepest fears. Interrogators would not stop at any hint of weakness. Any hint of weakness was used as an opportunity to intensify the pressure. Physical torture methods during interrogations included techniques such as waterboarding, where prisoners were asphyxiated, or electric shocks applied to the extremities and genitals. These practices were deliberately designed to break the strongest resistance. Prisoners who attempted to resist faced even harsher punishments, such as deprivation of food and water for days or confinement in painful positions for long hours. Wounds and injuries accumulated, but access to medical care was minimal. Guards would only intervene when the prisoner was on the verge of death, not out of humanity, but to make sure he lived long enough to be interrogated again. As the days turned into weeks, the effects of this regime were evident. Many of the prisoners began to show signs of mental collapse, hallucinations, panic attacks, loss of memory, and a constant fear of what lay ahead. Some tried to resist by clinging to their loyalty to the Chapitos, but even the strongest began to crack under the constant pressure. Those who finally gave in, offering information in exchange for relief, were met with a bitter reality. Cooperation did not mean the end of their suffering. Interrogators, distrusting the veracity of their confessions, continued to apply torture to confirm the data. In some cases, the prisoners tried to take their own lives, desperate to escape the hell in which they found themselves. However, the guards were attentive to these attempts and took extreme measures to prevent the prisoners from achieving their goal. This absolute control, which denied them even the possibility of ending their suffering, was another way of reaffirming the power of the system over them. Despite the brutalities of this regime, the information obtained was crucial to the operations of the SEDENA. The prisoners revealed details about trafficking routes, the locations of weapons and drug caches, and the names of collaborators, both inside and outside Mexico. This information allowed the armed forces to carry out a series of successful operations that further weakened the cartel. But these successes were not without controversy. The tactics used to obtain this information generated criticism both inside and outside Mexico, with human rights organizations denouncing the systematic use of torture and the violation of international laws. Over time, some of the prisoners who survived this brutal regime were brought before the courts to face charges for their crimes. However, many of them were so physically and mentally deteriorated that they were barely able to participate in their own trials. Their court appearances, with weakened bodies and blank stares, became a symbol of the human cost of the drug war, not only for the victims, but also for the perpetrators. And so we come to the end of this video. If you liked it, I invite you to give us your like to continue making more videos like this one. And don't forget to subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any of our new videos. I wish you a great day. Until next time.